Mr. Penland,
Hey, I had someone was sort of giving me a hard time over you there a minute or two ago, and I finally straightened her out.
Did you? Who was it?
No, I was kidding. How's your mother-in-law?
My mother.
Yeah, she said she was. I guess real nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was. I was bragging on how good you was, you and your brother. Well, he married my daughter.
Ah.
That's right. What's like the name? I was in the early this morning when the bar.
Right through here, dear.
Said a real nice one.
Dottie,
As well as sheriffs have.
Dottie.
That's only fair.
Undertakers as well as sheriffs.
Chief Deputy's much more photogenic. Go ahead there, Chief.
Take his picture right there.
No.
They run from me. They know better.
See.
See y'all.
Hello, Barbara. How are you? Good. Well, why, yes.
Now this is the lady right here. Sister worked with me 36 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Clarine, you remember Clarine?
Yes, I've heard all about your sister.
She's a good lady.
She was. We all did. Get cooler out there, ain't it? I don't think so.
I thought, no, Clarence could see me now. But she'd have been here, she'd have been right out,
Oh, yeah.
right in here with us.
Still here. She's pretty good.
Are you feeling better, George?
I got to go home yesterday.
No.
Go to medicine.
1, 20, 40, 60, 80, 1, 2, was this 73 or 80? 73, isn't it? All right, 120, 40, 60, 70, 1, 2, 3, 99, and thank you. No, the other day I had our answering machines all messed up, and I meant to call the house and see if it's really working or what. And I was playing back the messages, you know, and there was a message sometime from way back in the summer from Clarine, or maybe a year ago on that. I thought, how weird, you know.
Dolly,
Yes,
so your sister worked here for 30-something years?
yes, she
36
did.
years.
36 years.
I guess she felt like a part of the
Oh,
family.
she did. This was her
She
family.
was part of the family.
Yeah, she was. She is a dedicated employee, too.
So what do you think of Penland's store?
Oh, I love Penland's store. I rode up here.
You did?
Yeah.
Did you come every day?
Oh,
almost?
not every day, but when we got a chance to come to town, I always come.
Yeah.
My daddy traded here.
So you remember Jim Penland?
Oh, sure. Miss Penland.
Oh. It's a big part of this community,
It
isn't it?
sure is. A big part.
Can I cover this?
Thank you. When did Clarine quit working here?
When she died,
So,
died May the 6th.
this past year?
Well, she was done it all. She done sailing, and like I say, she was called clerk. She could do about anything at the outfield. $155.50.
Yeah.
$125. Have you been to school today? Yeah, that's good. Two. Oh, 5. We thank you.
Thank you.
It's getting colder out there, ain't it?
Here's this. I have a quarter, so that would
I
make
used
it
to, I used to told me $1. Yours a bit cheaper.
Oh,
Yeah, not even yours is a quarter higher. There you go.
okay.
Is that all you need?
Yes.
Chewing gum?
Here you go.
25.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Bye.
Well, I grew up in around Tampa where they made those cigars. Have a Tampa?
Yeah. Push is getting right, eh?
Yeah.
Or maybe he done found Santa Claus.
I think yes.
You ready?
Hold on. Puss, get closer to him.
Yeah, a little bit closer. Can you see that?
Yeah.
You ready?
Hold on. Okay, I'm ready. Hey, Puss, stand up close to his walker like you're gonna get in the cash register and let him shoot you.
Yeah.
There you go. Act like you're gonna rob him, Puss.
Over this way? Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me. Well, let's see here. Wait a minute, let me run out of shells. Robbery in process.
Is that a shell? Puss, you have to say, give me all your money.
Yeah, wait a minute, let me get. I think I gotta get right there. Right, quit. I must have broke it. What about that?
Well, I guess you shot Puss one time too many.
Yeah.
We could put the sound in there.
Yeah.
You can just point it at him.
Just pointed, they'll do the sound.
Pow!
We'll add the sound in.
All right, wait just a minute. Maybe it ain't tore up yet. Let's see here.
There you got a customer.
Hell yeah.
They try to rob you?
Not really. They broke in here one time. We caught them with my cameras.
Yeah.
I've got cameras sitting back there in the back, over next to where that clock is up through there. That's when John's boy, you know.
Hello there.
Hey,
Pretty good. How's it going?
Hey, how are
You
you?
never know what
Still here.
she's up to.
No.
Better watch her.
The local sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're filming George?
Yeah.
You know, that's all there is to that. You might have to have a couple tomatoes. I can't.
Reaching in, getting
I'm resisted.
Well, you had a good day today?
I've had a really good day. This is just an amazing place. That's all there is to it.
Isn't it?
You know, you never know what opportunities are going to
yeah.
present themselves.
When you walk in, you don't know what you're doing. Walk out there.
There you go.
Well, you loaned me about $1.75.
Right.
But y'all fly. I want to put that on top of it.
Okay.
So you had a pretty good day today?
I have a very good day yet. I won't complain. Now let's see how the post office, bank, and Madison Mill are doing.
Now, by any chance, did you leave some glasses at the shop?
I might have. There's no telling. These are dollar glasses.
Okay.
There's
Are they reading glasses?
Three's fine.
That might be me.
Yeah.
I didn't miss them until you said something, Barbara.
I thought about wearing them.
Excuse me. Well, if anybody needs them, they're welcome to borrow them. Are they over there? The shop open?
Yeah, just in their lane. Go to the curtain and I think in that little window thing.
Yeah, that sounds
Let's go get her.
good. I'll go see if they're mine.
Well, hey,
Can we retire yet?
Huh?
Did we make enough to retire?
No, there's a check I had in there, I forgot even about having it in there.
You gonna be there?
I had more money than I thought I had.
That never happens to me.
You know what I like.
Have you?
We had, them old mannequins, you remember, we put that on old, Kylie Gunner,
Yeah.
policeman, put it over an island, dressed her up just like a woman, and, put some bullet holes in her chest, ketchup all over, and got him to go over there and investigate it, told him that Frank Oakwood had an affair with a woman over and the gun went off, you know, killed her. And I said, I'm gonna give you $500 to keep that under your hat. He said, by God, he wasn't going to jail for $500. Never would get that. We had a pretty good thing over there. What you need today?
You can get warm for me.
Warmed up, okay.
Trying to anyway. I believe it's gonna snow on us.
They say it's gonna get pretty cold now, ain't it?
Down to 40 something.
10 after 4.
So what'd they do with the mannequin?
Oh, we, like in mannequins, we dressed up one and to take it over an island. We was gonna play a prank on this police officer when he come at 12 o'clock.
Right.
And we, dressed her up, fully dressed her. And took a .38 pistol and shot 3 or 4 holes in her chest and put ketchup on her like blood. And he come in, I told him, I want you to do me a favor. He said, what is that? I said, one of my officers shot this woman over there in an island, having an affair over there, and accidentally the gun went off, killed her. And I said, if you were to sort of sweep this on the table, I'll give you $500. He said, by gosh, I ain't going to jail. we brought some goods back in. Yeah, we pulled it on Coon White one time, and he was driving the ambulance one over there, and he said, who done that? And I says, your old cousin Tyler. I said, you know what? He said, Lord, that's my cousin. Like had a heart attack. He was always pulling tricks.
I said, Lord, they probably done away with it.
No, we ain't done away with it.
I was gonna pay some on it.
You owe $80.05. Okay.
She didn't give me a receipt.
Well, this one.
Yeah.
So you'll owe $70.
Any lines today?
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah.
You can have one of these stick pieces, sweetheart.
Get you one of them.
You can have one of the stick pieces of candy.
No, I'll
That's
get
it.
you 2 or 3 of them there.
Just get one.
What kind do you think I should get?
What kind do you like? You like butterscotch?
We got peppermint, lemon.
That's it? Okay. That's peppermint. Is that what you want, Clay? Kelsey, you want, why don't you, lemon, raspberry? Say thank you to Mr. George for all this generosity.
No, here, get you.
Oh, that's good. That really is good.
Get you 3 or 4.
I still got Valentine's
I know.
candy.
You might want to get mama a piece too. Get that some.
Okay.
Get you 4 or 5 different. Get 4 or 5 different brands.
Here.
Flavors.
Just try one of these.
This is what I have.
One of these. What do you got?
They get
Put them in there.
you that.
Can I have one of them? Just one?
No, no. We're going to have them after supper. You
You
can have
like
them. Okay.
kids? You ever eat any kids or BB bags? You like kids?
What,
You
Mama?
like BB bags?
Dada, what do we?
She's taking your picture, it looks like.
That's what I had back when I was about your size.
Is this for your own?
Yeah.
Okay, mine.
We came in, I introduced her to George, and come to find out that his family's from Johnston County.
Yeah.
Daddy,
Down there,
Daddy,
that's where my mom's family's from down around
They make some
Princeton.
of the best barbecue, that's what you brought me.
And so we brought us Eastern North Carolina style pork barbecue. It's made with vinegar sauce instead of the red
Oh,
sauce.
yeah.
Well, I appreciate
It's
it.
an incredible store, isn't it?
Oh yeah, George is just so generous. He's just so good. Always, anything's a little bit old, he won't ever let me pay for it. If we get a watermelon, I see that. If we get a watermelon that's no good, I just come back and tell him, no, put that back. No, thank you. Come on, this is good. Thank you, sir. No, my kids come. Put them right in there with this. And those you got in mama the other day was good.
That's
I don't know, Smith.
sour stuff. Yeah, that's the last of the homegrown. I come there last night. Get you 5 or 6 hours.
Okay.
Because they're small and they'll be gone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're up.
All right. Put it back.
What is it?
That's chewing gum. You want some chewing gum?
No. Come on. This is mighty good. Thank you,
I
George.
appreciate that.
All righty.
Thank you. Y'all right back.
One day we'll get in here, we'll check back on that Woodard side of the family and see if we're really any kids.
Okay. Bye. Bye.
Say bye-bye. Tell Mr. George thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, high on the hog there. They know how to make barbecue down there. East part of the state. That's where my grandpa was from.
That's where she's from.
Yeah.
Go
What
eat.
do you got, young man?
I gotta get cigarette.
Let me, what John eat?
I'm 18.
Are you 21?
I wish.
What year was you born in?
Me? 83.
83.
That's,
You'd be,
I just,
are you 17?
I just turned.
I couldn't turn. Not 83. Let me call that difference. Boys, what y'all need today?
You still film the second time I'm gonna be on your tape?
Know what year he was born
No,
either.
that's where I got him. I said, what year was you born then? That's a cover now. See, that boy's always got money.
Always my bud. That's mama's money.
Oh. How was school today? Pretty rough.
So always rough.
And we thank you.
What are you filming for? Just to be filming.
Come on, sons.
See y'all later.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I've got him here. Well, Harper tried to call on one of the places to disconnect. I guess we had the wrong 2930 or 29 something up there on the bypass. Did you move? Oh, well, I was back here in the back. You never did find that. Ain't you? Well, she had brought him in. You hadn't been gone by the hour. That boy brought him in here. I've got him. See you. Bye.
Bill?
I got that boy on them cigarettes, didn't I?
He got him.
Yeah.
What?
I heard him. Them other two's waiting on him there, you know. And he said, I said, why don't you 80? I mean, he said he was 18.
Where's his ID?
Well, I did his ID, but he had a Florida ID. And I said, it won't take me just a minute. No, he said, just forget about that.
Yeah.
He didn't know what year he was
No,
born.
he didn't want you. They tried that 2 or 3 times.
Well, see, the year is 82, anything
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Come in. Yeah.
How are you? I brought the camera. This is just for my own amusement and amazement.
Yeah.
I have to get my friend on the video.
Oh, yes. I was really in big time the last 2 days.
I guess you were. Channel 13.
Come in here where it's warm.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going to show you all these papers.
Oh,
and
I'm
things.
so excited to see it. You're wildly famous.
Oh,
You're not
such is
supposed to
fame.
get famous before me.
Oh, my. I'm ahead of the game.
You are way ahead of the game.
Today it's been such a sort of quiet. It's sort of like a letdown.
I know, when all the excitement and then suddenly.
Yeah, and suddenly it gets quiet. I showed all the one I spoke to the picture of the last president who did not get the electoral vote, Benjamin Harrison, 1888. Then I showed them, I said, what if the states were the same size that they are electorally? How the United States would look if the sizes of states were determined by their electoral votes. See, if a candidate wanted to campaign in these states that are dark, he could win the presidency by just one other state and not campaign in any of the others. That would be fair, would it?
No.
So he'd get 246 votes in these states, and he'd just have to carry Missouri or maybe Alabama and win the presidency. So that's that.
So why, tell me again what your reason was for you believe we need the Electoral College still. Why can't we just go with the popular vote?
Okay. The popular vote might lead to the election of some radical or someone who really isn't intended to be president, because he might represent maybe such a one-sided view that he just cares enough states to win. But the Electoral College is the buffer between the popular vote by the people and electing a king or a dictator. And in the early days, in 1787, they didn't want to do that because their experience with England was such that they didn't want anything like they'd had before.
Right.
You see?
Right.
Now,
So,
I was interviewing all these papers. I'll just show you this one in the Asheville Citizen. The Asheville Citizen said, meanwhile, Wednesday, Western North Carolina's representative in the Electoral College, Joe Morgan of Madison County, said he'll go to Raleigh in December and reflect the mountain people's vote. But he'll do so with the belief that the Electoral College system that was so critical in the Bush-Gore election might be an out-of-date system that needs to be changed. Now, then I'm quoting, abandoning it would cause more activity and campaigning and competition because we don't need 15 or 20 states where presidential candidates never goes because he knows he will not win those states. Now, for instance, like Kansas. Kansas goes Republican every year.
right.
Well, why does the Democrat want to go to Kansas? He won't get anywhere. The Republican won it. Bob Dole won it. Bush won it. All the rest of them won it.
Right.
So you see, that's the way it is.
So what, do you think any changes need to be made then? What do
I
you
think
suggest?
that I really think that we should go back to the system whereby we let the people decide, so there'd be competition in each state, because I think we've graduated to that point now. Now, in the past, I wouldn't have favored that, but I
Right.
think in the future it'd be a good idea.
Is this the most unusual electoral process you have witnessed
Oh,
in
yes.
your life?
Most unusual I've ever known of. It was more unusual than it was in 1948. Now, in 1948, we had an election in which Henry Wallace ran for president. He had been Secretary of Agriculture and Vice President. Harry Truman ran, and he had been Vice President and President. And the other one who ran was Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, Governor of South Carolina. Now, he ran on the states' rights ticket, and he won 4 southern states, and he got about 39 electoral votes. So you see, it was very close.
But as far as going back and all the recounts,
Oh, I think that's the great, I think that's to be avoided at all, if at all possible. And I think we should count the votes just as they are and not go to court and have recounts and then another recount. Karen Hughes, Mr. Bush's able assistant, was so good. She said, we had one recount in Florida and Bush won it. We had another one now and Bush has won it. So what else? Are they going to count the ballots over and over until they're satisfied and happy with the outcome?
Right.
Oh, lots of things going on. So here I am today, and it's just as quiet.
So give me a brief recap of when the media frenzy began with you, and which newspapers it included, and which reporters you were most impressed with and why.
Oh, that's a good question. I began Monday. Monday morning at 10 o'clock, I got a call from Mr. Barber of the Asheville, of the WLOS TV. He said, Joe, I'll be here about 1 o'clock to interview you for about the Electoral College and about your participation in it in Raleigh in December, etc. I said, I'll be ready. So about 1 o'clock, I saw WLOS come in. He and his assistant brought the cameras and all in. They pecked on the door, and I said, come in. So we went. I took him on a tour of the house. He really liked all these books. And he asked some good questions, and he had studied and knew what he was talking about. So we sat down in there, and he asked me a lot of questions, and I knew the answers to all of them because I had just called Dr. Stern about an hour before at Marshall College, professor of political science. And I said, Dr. Stern, I read once where it said the Electoral College was really a compromise between the wishes of the Founding Fathers who wrote the Constitution in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention and the Congress. And he thought of me and said, no, it's not really a compromise. The Congress didn't have much to do with it except the Constitutional Convention said the Senate, each state would have 2 senators and each state would have as many representatives as they have people. Now, like Vermont, it just has about 150,000 people, but it still has a congressman. But this district, Charles Taylor represents 600,000 people.
Right.
So you see, little Vermont would never vote to get rid of the Electoral College because they're pleased with their power. New York might want to get rid of it because they have all these representatives, but they're losing 2 in this next census. And so I think efforts will be made to get rid of it. Hillary Clinton said she's going to get rid of it. But look here. In history, 100 efforts have been made to change the Electoral College. But none have succeeded. Why? It takes 2/3 of the Congress, House and Senate, to ratify any change. And it takes 3/4 of all the states to approve the amendment. So it'll be a high standard. So I doubt if it'll ever be changed. Certainly not in the next 4 years.
Okay. Now, tell me about all the newspapers that have come.
Oh,
And how did...
mentioned that too. Said he was elected because he's worked in the party a long time. That's the way you get elected. You don't get elected by being here just a year or two. You have to work in the party 15, 20 years to get elected to National Convention or Presidential Elector.
So, how did you get elected?
Okay, that's the question he asked me. Cheryl Barber. Cheryl has been with him a long time. He said, how did you get elected? I said, I was elected from the 11th Congressional District at T.C. Robertson High School in May by all the delegates from 15 counties who assembled there for the purpose of electing 3 delegates to the National Convention and 1 presidential elector and 3 alternates to the National Convention. I said, I was elected by the people. I was not appointed.
Okay.
Oh, he said, that's even more impressive. I said, hundreds of people voted for me. I said, Colonel Jesse Ledbetter, former state senator, nominated me. Dedrick Brown of Mars Hill seconded my nomination. And I said, Representative Gillespie of McDowell County was standing in wait in case I needed an extra person to nominate me. And Representative Lanier Kansley, who was at the meeting last night that I spoke to, he was ready to nominate me.
And tell me about the newspaper. Which was the first newspaper that called?
The first newspaper that called me was the Charlotte Observer. I believe it was the day after the election. And the Charlotte Observer, the lady asked me a lot of questions, so like what you've asked. But she never did ask me if anyone had made overtures to me to get me to vote for Gore or somebody else. But later, when the lady called from London, she called twice. And the first time she asked regular, ordinary historical questions. Then she called back and she said, I forgot something. I said, oh, go right ahead. She said, has anyone tried to get you to vote for someone other than George W. Bush?
I said, no, ma'am. And I said, it wouldn't do any good if they did, because in North Carolina, this is one of the 24 states where you must vote for the one you say you'll vote for before the convention. You have to vote for the nominee of the party. And I said, furthermore, I'm committed to him, and I wouldn't consider voting for anyone else anyway.
Okay, now, did she tell you how she got your phone number?
Oh, they called. I'll tell you another thing. Someone called from Austin, Texas, and talked to Mr. Robert Long, a very prominent lawyer in Asheville, who helped Mr. Taylor with all of his tax problems.
Right.
And he said, "Do you know Joe Morgan?" He said, "Sure, I've known him for about 30 years." And he kept asking questions, and he wondered why he was asking so many questions. Said, "What kind of fellow is he? Can he be depended on? Is he reliable?" And he said, "You know he's a presidential elector." And Robert almost forgot about it. "Oh, yes, I remember he is." "Oh," he said, "you'd have to shoot him to get him to vote for anybody else." Said he wouldn't vote for anybody except George Bush. He's a long-time loyal Republican. Said there's no doubt who will you vote for. I shook hands with him and I patted him on the back. I said, "Thank you for that." But I said, I knew he was working with the Bush camp. So that was good. I don't plan to change and vote for anybody else. That's silly. No one can bribe me to vote for someone whom... You think I'd face all these people around my home and in all the district, and then someone say, "Oh, he voted for Al Gore." That's heresy. That's worse than hypocrisy. That's terrible.
Well, how did the woman from the London Times get your
Oh,
phone
she
number?
got it. She called the United States. She called the State Department, and they had all these. And in Washington, she said, I believe it's in Washington State Department. Then to confirm it, she called Secretary of State of North Carolina, and they gave him my name. All the people who've called me, most of them called the Secretary of State's office, and they have my name. And they're to send me, Mr. Barber asked me yesterday if I'd received my plaque yet. I said, no, they'll send them a little closer to the time we go to Raleigh. They're to send me a plaque indicating I'm the presidential elector. I'll let you be the first to see it.
Great. Now, when do you go to Raleigh?
I go the 18th of December, which is on a Monday. We go to the old State House, the 14 electors, right there. And we vote for president. And I got a call about 2 weeks ago from former governor. What was it? Did I hear something?
I did. I heard someone outside.
Yeah. Oh.
Now, whew. Okay.
And so the lady from London called first. She says, "This is seemed like Mrs. Small or Smalling or something from London." And I said, "Oh." I first told her that I didn't like Tony Blair too much. He's the prime minister. I said the reason is I watch him on C-SPAN, and he's always attacking the leader of the Conservative Party. And I said that's unnecessary because he's doing his job, and why doesn't he stick to issues instead of he's not in a campaign, so why is he always talking? She said, "I agree with you on that." So she asked me all kinds of questions about the Electoral College, how I got interested, what I'd done all my life, why I was interested today, and what would my feeling be when I go to Raleigh, and all like that. I said, I've been for Bush, I'm for Bush, I will be for him, and even if he defeated, I'm still for Mr. Bush. So that was that. And so she didn't, she knew that I was thoroughly committed. And then when the Charlotte Observer, I have it here somewhere, but I can't find it, they quoted me as saying never. They asked me if I'd ever consider voting for somebody else. I said never, never. So it's in the Charlotte Observer. It's in this pack, but anyway, this over here is the actual system. But they quoted me as never, and I was first one quoted of all the delegates, all the ones, because they liked my definite answer that no one can induce me to vote for anyone except Governor George W. Bush.
Now, will you be quoted in the London Times?
Oh, yeah, she'll have it there. Now, what I want to do, I want to get to a bookstore in Asheville and some places. I'm going to find out where I can get that. Yeah. I don't have that copy yet, but I'll get it because it's in there. She had the longest interview of any. Charlotte Observer, seemed like it was about 5 minutes. The Gastonia Gazette, the lady knew more about history than anyone who talked with me. She even knew, as I knew, that 2 states do not employ the Electoral College per se like the others do. For instance, Maine and Nebraska. You know what they do? If you win the whole state, they don't go by that. You have to win the district. There are 2 congressional districts. If you won one district, you get 1 electoral vote. If you lose the other one, then in the state of Maine, you don't get 4 votes, you just get 3. In Nebraska, they have 3 congressional districts. One is represented, I happen to know because there's a famous coach, Bill Osborne. He coached out basketball. I heard him for years. He won in the 3rd district, got nearly 80% of the vote as a Republican. And he was so popular that nobody wanted to run against him. But anyway, if in Omaha, if they win the 3rd congressional district, the Republicans, and lose the other 2, then they just get the 2 votes for the senators, and that 1 vote, 3 votes instead of 5. See, they would get 5.
Now, what about voting irregularities in Madison County?
Oh, that's a long story, but let me tell you about the election of 1964. In 1964, in the first Democratic primary in Madison County, it was so corrupt and so crooked that the State Board of Elections came and sat in Marshall where the judge sits in the courtroom for weeks. And they had hundreds and hundreds of people going across the stage. They would put their left hand on the Bible and raise their hand, and the questioners, the lawyers, would say, "Mr. So-and-so, did you vote on Election Day in the primary in May 1964? No, I didn't vote. I was working. I worked on the farm. I went fishing. I did all this. But it's recorded. It's recorded in the book that you voted. Someone forged my name. I didn't vote." Then the next one. Put their hand up, their hand on the Bible and hand up. "Mrs. Jones, did you vote on Election Day on the primary May so-and-so 1964? No, sir, I did not vote that day. I was busy. I went to visit my sister in Marion or somewhere. I wasn't there." And hundreds did that. And it was fraudulent. See, Zeno Ponder ran for for state senate, which covered several counties. In those days, it covered these counties: Madison, Yancey, Mitchell, and McDowell. And in McDowell, there was a fellow who ran against Mr. Ponder. And he got the most votes because Mr. Ponder only got and manufactured a big vote in Madison County, stole it. The other counties he didn't get, but just, So, he didn't win. The State Board of Elections approved it to be fraudulent from beginning to end. And Mr. Joe Huff, who used to practice law, he doesn't practice much now. He's up in years. His son Stephen practices now. Stephen won, incidentally, a Morehead Scholar. He was a Morehead Scholar. But anyway, Mr. Huff helped them, and they found it fraudulent from beginning to end. So, to make a long story short, you may say, what happened? In my precinct here, a fellow up on Grapevine, they kicked him out. He was a registrar, kicked him out. All the registrars in the county kicked out. All the Board of Elections, Madison County Democrats were all kicked out because they found it to be fraudulent from beginning to end. And the results were set aside. They had a second primary in which they had an honest election. And James Ramsey up on East Fork was our judge down here, or registrar down here. He's a fine man, and everything went along fine. My uncle on Grapevine, Joel Morgan, before he died, he helped him in the election. And Bobby Jean Peake and I, Dr. Bobby Jean Peake Rice, and I, the one that got bit with the dog when she's doing the census.
Right.
Very fine lady. She retired as, she was in the county school system. She was there. She'd go around to all the teachers and give them advice and help them, give them pencils and paper, all kinds of things they needed. She was called the, not superintendent, she was right below the superintendent. Anyway, we were to help the illiterates. So a lot of the illiterates would come in, and there was a lady running for state representative who defeated Liston in the fall election, and her name was on there, and it said, Mrs. Francis C. Ramsey. He said, oh, she's Heather Welper. Well, see, we weren't supposed to go into detail as to what they were and what they weren't. We're just supposed to read them out and say, do you wish to vote for Miss Ramsey? So, oh, yeah, I want to vote for her. But see, she was not Heather Welper. There was a lady, Mrs. Florence Ramsey, was Heather Welper. So a lot of the illiterates voted wrong. That convinced me that they don't add much to the elective process. And poor old Junior White that I knew for years used to walk all around Marshall. He's from Grapevine. He voted wrong, and he saw the name of Mr. Wade Huey. He could read enough to see Wade Huey. Oh, I know him. That's Wade Huey. I'm going to vote for him. I said, well, good. I'll vote for him. But he voted for, they voted for a lot of them that they didn't know who they were voting for. But Mrs. Frances C. Ramsey won by 1,400 votes and defeated Liston the only time Liston's ever been defeated since 1960, and he's just now retired.
So this has been a landmark election
Yeah,
in many ways.
yeah. And the Republicans held on for 6 years. The Democrats didn't win anything in Madison County. 64, 66, or 68. They finally got back in a little bit, and Zeno sort of kept his head down for so long and was so embarrassed and humiliated by what happened. But in 1970, they sort of tried to come back out from under the rocks and won. And they stayed in and did pretty well till 86. Then Dedrick Brown won for sheriff in 86, and Judge Baker won head of the Board of Education, so the Republicans were in control there for about 4 years. Then they were out from 90 to 94, then they got in control in 94 and stayed in 98. So you see, it's been a sort of a sketchy, the political system here has been up and down, and the Republicans and Democrats in and out, changing offices because there's been conflicting views of how their service has been and so forth. But Madison County has been a real patchwork of political activity, but most of it from 1950, when Zeno's crowd got in, to about 86, they were mostly in control except those 6 years. And while they were in control, the people, only ones who could get jobs had to be, they'd go check and see if they were Democrat. See, that's not good. And most of the good school teachers left the county.
And when was that in this?
That was from 50 to 86, with the exception of 64 to 70.
Okay, did you notice any voting irregularities this year?
When I was watching at Hot Springs, I noticed this. A certain person down there was overly aggressive in trying to help people vote. And he wouldn't grab them by the arm like he did 2 years ago, and they said he voted one fellow twice 2 years ago. So that's why I was down there watching from when they opened to 1 o'clock. By that time, Sheriff Brown said, you can tell he'll learn, he better watch, because this is a federal election and he could get put in jail. Well, this fellow would go up to him and say, "Ah, Mr. So-and-so, how are you? It's just so good to see you." And so pat him on the back, and before you know it, they'd say, "Will you help me?" And they went in and helped him vote. Well, it was the only thing that made it legal was that he had more or less asked them to do it by being so friendly and so rushing up to him, and then they sort of hated to say they go in by themselves. But several went in and had him to help them vote. It's not really supposed to do that. That's why I didn't call the FBI agent. Judge Briggs had given me an FBI agent number in Asheville. They were going to be here to watch the election. Also, Forrest Ball, an attorney, he doesn't practice much now. He stays at his home on Sweetwater Road. But he used to be the county attorney, and he ran for judge, different things, when he's more active. He said, "Joe, I'll be glad to help you anytime during the day. Should something come up, you just call me." So I had 2 numbers, and I sat there all that time, and I saw a lot of people that I knew, and I saw, this is interesting, you didn't know her, but Mrs. Betsy Powell Gardner and her husband, who made their wealth through computers and so forth, they have a big mansion at the end of Lewis Branch on Big Laurel. Well, I was sitting there, and suddenly I saw them come into the Hot Springs precinct. I thought, that's strange. I didn't know, but they had built a home down near Paint Rock in Hot Springs, and they were registered in Hot Springs. And she told me, she'd been a good friend of mine for years, and she told me they also have a home in Knoxville.
Wow.
Very wealthy. Mm-hmm. Betsy Powell Gardner. And so what I want to do, the reason she became disaffected with the Republicans was because she found irregularities over on Laurel. She was eating in Johnson City one evening, and she saw a lady that she had seen vote in Laurel. And she asked her, "Where do you live?" "I live in Flag Pond, Tennessee." See, and she took that to Howard Riddle and the Board of Election, and that woman, it caused a big to-do, and they had a hearing in the courtroom. Oh, she got after him. So this last time I went to Laurel after 1 o'clock to check on things. Mr. Brackens, who was in charge, was a most delightful fellow, and Mrs. the lady that I read in this book about the victims, I have it here somewhere, of the Laurel Massacre, she was there. Mrs. Glendora Cutshaw, the wife of the late Clarence B. Cutshaw, who ran for Board of Education several years ago and had a store over there. And I talked with her, and they were running along very well, and they were quite busy. And the school was being built there, and it just things were just a lot of activity going on. It was real nice. But Hot Springs, all the time I was there, it was sort of like a hollow. It seemed hollow. It seemed like everyone was so quiet, and it just barely went in. They'd talk to them, yeah, just whisper, and they voted, and out they went. It was eerie, scary, and it seemed like they were afraid or something. So I made no complaints after I left, except I did tell the Board of Elections one thing. See, that little ponder that fell down there used to be on the Board of Education, and he'd tell little silly jokes that were stupid, and people wouldn't even laugh. He's not well known for his. But anyway, one of our Republicans went to and wanted to work in the polls, and he criticized him and said, "No, you go home." He did let him vote though, and talked mean to him. And I told the Board of Elections about it, and they didn't like that. They said you should greet everyone and treat them. They said something like goofy or silly or something, you know. Talk to him mean, and that wasn't too good. That's the only real irregularity down there that I knew anything about. But they're doing better.
So why is it that in mountain communities like Madison County are so politically divided?
Well, I'll tell you why. Zeno Ponder and his crowd politicized it years ago for so many years that it's hard to get over. They're still lingering from the effects of it, and that was everything was thought in political terms. A big university came here and was going to settle in the beautiful mountains around Laurel River. They found a place up there they wanted to scoop out and landscape and have a university there. Granted, it was a little offbeat university. It was the Maharaja, and they believed in extra sense perception and in sort of doing the kowtow and doing what is this that they do? They carry flowers and they work for peace, and they meditate and they get on their knees and so forth. And guess what the county commissioners in Zeno said at that time? "Oh, sir, we'll be glad to have your university to establish here and all like that, but said you have to give us a kickback." They you know where they went? They went to Idaho, where they wanted to be in the mountain scene, where it was serene, where there was pristine forest and beauty. They believed in all these wonderful things, extra good environment, all like that. But everyone who wanted any business it shied away from Madison County because of the bad politics. They had politics in their schools. And you ask that question, here's another answer to it. The schools were seeped with politics. Every teacher who taught there at the end of the year, they would be approached by someone who say, "Oh, now you've got to give so much to the campaign kitty of the Democratic Party," whether they were Democrat or not. So a lot of them objected. And they'd say, "Well, you know what that means, don't you?" So two teachers, I remember, said this. One was Miss Dotter at Hot Springs, who lived in what is now the Inn years ago, and I knew her well. She ran the bookmobile all over Canada. She said, "Well, if they don't let me teach schools, that I might learn to raise chickens and sell the eggs and do a little farm work, and I might try to find another job and do something else." And she just smiled. She said they were so arrogant. "Oh, you've got to give them money to campaign." Now they never mentioned that. It's not been mentioned for several years because some new leaders said, "Oh, you don't do that. You don't sell school position." And so the good teachers would leave. Now I'll give you an example. There's a Mrs. Earhart at Mars Hill. She's a fine English teacher. She gave me a book on Upper Laurel. Let's see if I have it here. Long time ago, she gave me this little book on Upper Laurel. And she is now way up in her 80s, and she lives in Kenilworth, on the Kenilworth Place, Kenilworth Forest in Asheville, near the hospital. And so she one day she was up in Asheville, and she saw a principal up there, Mr. Hall, and she began to cry. And he said, "Why, Miss Earl, what's wrong with you? What's wrong? Who hurt your feelings?" She said, "Oh," and Zeno's crowd said that I couldn't teach anymore, said I hadn't done right, hadn't contributed to campaign kitty, and didn't belong to their party, didn't vote for them, didn't do as they should, you know. He said, "Don't worry about that. I'll get you a school right up here, and you teach up here." So before she got through up there and before she retired, guess what? She was the head of the reading program of the whole county. She was in charge of a lot of things and just did real well. So when they leave here, they go to greener pastures and do better.
Well, so why is it though, historically, when did...
It started in 1950. That's when Zeno came back from, he was doing this chemical work over at over in Tennessee. Where's that place, that scientific place there that World War II they experimented, right beyond Knoxville over there. He came back here and he decided that since Madison was all Republican then, and the state was Democrat, he said we wouldn't get as much money from the state or do all this and that, so he tried to make the county Democrat. Well, in the process, they made a lot of enemies and they had a lot of suits in court and all like that, and it made it very divisive, and everyone thought of politics as they're going to do this now. They thought of the political angle of it. They got too conscious of politics. Everything is politics. He was absorbed in politics. The state chairman one time sued Zeno, and down at Marshall they were in the courthouse one night, and they came out, and guess what? Someone had sneaked around and put stuff on their windshield so they couldn't see, couldn't get off. It's sticky stuff, and they never got home. And, you know, they're always doing tricks and things. Oh, it's terrible. Everything else is sort of makes you ready for it.
That's right. You've really hardened up as a well-known movie person. You are very relaxed.
Oh,
it's wonderful. So why are you a Republican?
Okay, I'm a Republican by philosophy, by belief, by background, and by tradition. I'll tell you an experience. When I was in service in Hawaii, supposedly serving my country, I read in the News Record, that used to be the only paper back then, that was in the 50s.
Okay.
In the mid-50s, I read in the News Record, even though I was not registered at that time, I registered after I got out of service. But I read in the News Record that Joe Morgan voted twice. He voted in the primary in the fall election. They didn't have enough sense or something to know that I might read the paper, or just because I was in Hawaii, they thought I wouldn't read it. And not only was I not registered, but they voted for me, the Democrats. That's the Ponderites. That's what they did. That was part of the pattern. So when I came back, got out of service and came back and went to Marshall, I said, I'm going to go register. So when I went in, the young lady in there, I said, her eyes, I never will forget, her eyes got big. She said, "Mr. Morgan, you're already registered." I said, "No, I have never registered. I want to register now the way I want to." So she looked and they had me registered Democrat. I told her, tear that up, and I registered Republican. The Zeno Ponder helped me a little to be a Republican, but I was Republican even before that because I was Republican by background and my family tradition and experience and beliefs and ideas, because I believe that Republicanism, I did at that time and still do, I believe that Republicanism is synonymous with national integrity and fiscal soundness. I like that aspect of the Republican philosophy and Republican ideals. So that's partly why I'm Republican. And in Madison County, I always want to be Republican to oppose the bad situation that I find here.
Do you believe that being a Republican is less government control?
Yes, they don't believe in many government programs, and you know the Democrats believe that any program comes along, they want to start it, and they never knew a program they didn't want to finance or have, and so forth. Republicans believe in less government interference with their lives, and the government should do only for the people what they cannot do for themselves. So that's why I'm a Republican. But in Madison County, I would always vote Republican anyway to counteract the bad influence of the other party. I have to tell you, when I was chairman in 1971-73, I put an ad in against Zeno. Here's what it said. Under Zeno's leadership, or lack of leadership, Madison County has become the county of the dreadful night, of the closed society, and a county in which you have no right to, or you have no access to getting jobs or anything unless you're a member of the party in power. And I said, that's not not true democracy. I said, in fact, it reminds me of the Third Reich of Germany, where someone may at any time be pecking on your door and you may be a victim. You might, if you cross their path, to do things against them. And I said, furthermore, Zeno and his crowd remind me of the biblical statement about the plague of frogs and flies. And I compared Zeno to Hitler and the smaller dictators such as Castro. Oh, Dr. Stern was here then. He hadn't been here long. He thought that was so funny.
So, did you vote a straight Republican ticket?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only one time did I ever almost vote Democrat. That's in 1978 when a banker from Charlotte ran against Jesse Helms, and he was the son of former Governor Hodges, and he was such a fine person, I almost voted for him. But then I thought that Jesse Helms, I thought he's going to continue his good philosophy of conservatism. I liked a lot that he stood for, so I finally decided to vote for him. But I almost voted for Mr. Hodges. Incidentally, Dr. Bentley of Marshall College was his campaign chairman in Madison County, Mr. Hodges. And he knew also that he is a very fine person.
Okay.
But on the county level, I've never seen any Democrat I would vote for.
Okay, so when did you get interested in politics?
I got interested in politics when I was in high school in the 1949-1950, along there. I will recall when Zeno Ponder's brother, Sheriff Ponder, was supposedly elected by 3 votes in 1950, and Dr. W.A. Sams was supposedly elected by 3 or 4 votes, and they took it to the state Supreme Court. And since they didn't find any evidence that they were elected, the Associate Justice of the state Supreme Court then was, guess who? Sam J. Erwin of Watergate fame, later of Watergate. And so he, that's 1950, and Watergate was 1973. That was 22 years later. He wrote and said, well, he thought that there might be enough evidence in 2 or 3 precincts, certain things happening. So the upshot was he sort of thought they won, but he didn't really say it for sure. He was sort of an ambiguous anomaly there. And so they got in, and once they got in, they tried to keep the county Democratic for a while.
Okay, and so you got interested in politics in high school.
Yes, I've always been interested in politics.
What is it that interests you?
I was interested in politics in 1944 when I was a kid down here at Center School, because our principal, Mr. Roberts, had us to discuss Roosevelt's election. And I said, old Roosevelt, and he said, what'd you say? I said, that old Roosevelt got reelected. I was interested even then.
So you were like...
When I was just about 12 or 13.
And once you became interested in politics...
I've never lost the interest. It's been a lifelong interest and a lifelong passion.
And what do you find interesting about politics? I
find about politics, what is interesting is the combativeness of the candidates and the clash of ideas and principles and the beliefs and so forth, and the background and standards of the candidates and the philosophy of the different parties.
And so all of your family's Republican?
Let me see. Frank Jr. over there is. Now, Dr. Monroe, I think he leans sort of toward the Democrats because he liked Al Gore, because he's from Tennessee, and of course you'd see why he liked. But he's more Democrat. But I had an older brother who's a strong Democrat, but all the rest of them, most of them are Republican.
So it's been a family history.
Mostly a family history. My late father was appointed by Lyndon Johnson, head of the Madison County Draft Board. Of course, Johnson may never have known he was appointed because he's on the county level. But he did vote